Welcome to
The method, we're eating or sleeping or fight. The method, for marriage or divorce or one night. Well, I know you probably think that it sounds pretty dumb, but the methods you use to get shit done. If you're chatting up a lover, you're going on a run, then it might be wise to heed the words of a pro with a little bit of help. Who knows, to get some happiness out of your woes, to get promoted to CEO of a happy mind inside your head. You don't want to wake up dead thinking why do you work so hard for things that hardly work for you. The method works.
Okay, it's good to be back, just me and Alex. We haven't actually done one of these since
this is running, which was
this is actually
5 episodes ago.
This is actually only the third one that we will have released, but we did a couple before. We released them as warm-ups that weren't very good.
They just weren't very interesting.
There was something we talked about in one of them that was interesting, but I can't remember what it was.
We did one on assumptions where we just said assumptions about 40
Yeah,
million
no, that
times.
one wasn't the one I thought was very good, though. That was not very good. Distinctly bad. The thing that I wanted to talk about today was relationships, and I'd really like to get a sort of sex therapist on or something like that to talk more deeply about the things that people find quite prudish. And maybe that'd be, I don't know, maybe that'd be cool. But I definitely would like to talk to someone about that, but I don't know any of those people myself. And often these people can be quite, I don't know, if you're not in the world, I think it can be quite cringy, where they're talking about things that, maybe that's just because we're so prudish, we cringe at the fact that someone's talking about sex.
Well, I don't think it's a very... Is it a common role, do you think? I don't think there's that many
What, a sex
people that
therapist?
Yeah.
Well, I guess a relationship therapist goes on it, touches on it as well, but I don't know. I don't know any.
No, that's what I mean. Like, I think it would be really hard for us to find
A sex
a
therapist?
sex therapist to interview. Maybe not.
I know some
We haven't
people on Instagram who do sort of like sexual education. In particular, the woman on Instagram is called Thong Greer, I really like, and she has a podcast called Hot Brain, which is also really good. But that's quite like light-hearted.
You want to get into like the nitty gritty of like...
No, I want light-hearted.
Oh, okay,
No, I don't want to
light-hearted.
get into the nitty-gritty.
You don't want to go like really deep into
No.
the science behind sex and relationships.
Oh, I would like to. Yeah, I think that'd be cool. Like what we were talking about earlier. I also read that book by Sarah Pascoe called Animal, which I'd really recommend. It seems the whole book, whenever they talk to the audience in the book, or the reader, they talk to you as if you're a woman. So it feels like it wasn't set out for guys to read. And it is very like female oriented, but I thought it was really good. I learned a lot.
Never. So one thing that I've thought about with relationships and with other things actually that are very like, that a big part of people's lives is that you never actually learn, like you're never taught anything for the most part about how to like be in a good relationship.
No.
And I don't know if I find that strange or not, because maybe it's something that you should just sort of learn based on your own personality, but you also obviously mainly learn based on your experiences and what you see around you. And if all of those things are negative, or all the relationships that you see around you aren't very like good, then I feel like that's going to mean that you're not going to be very good at relationships.
And you feel that in relation to yourself?
No, I don't think so. So I don't know why that thought, but I feel like I'm pretty good at relationships.
Yeah.
But I when I think about like what people who aren't very good at relationships and people who can't like control their emotions within a relationship, and they're always arguing and they're always like, just never seems like they're having a good relationship. And I know several of those people, and like what I want to know is why that is, like where that comes from.
But do you want to talk about your family relationship? If not, I'll just cut it out.
I thought we were talking about like lover relationships.
No, we are. Oh, for sure. But what I mean is, you're saying that like the relationships you grew up with affect the relationships you have.
Yeah, right.
And obviously, your family that you
not
grew
very
up
good relationships.
with. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
has interest, at least, don't want to put sort of judgment on it, but it's different.
no, yeah, that makes sense because I guess in that case it can go both ways because the relationships that I witnessed as a child weren't very positive. So, but for me, I feel like I've done it in maybe the other way. So I've seen that and thought I don't want to be like that. So then I've done it the other way rather than like gone down the other road, which would be the opposite, which is like I think that's okay or I think that's how it should be. Mm-hmm. So I've gone the other way.
And
hopefully.
And the people you're talking about, person X, their family relationships are not very positive, and you're saying that their relationship now is also not very positive.
Depends who you're talking about.
Well, just any of these people you're thinking about.
Well,
because I think that's true. I think you definitely reflect, or you definitely reflect your like the upbringing, but you also can be installed with those ideals. Because like in my family, my parents are married, happily married. They always have been. They've not been divorced ever, and they always promote an idea of the stable family unit and staying together and working through problems rather than ducking out. And like often my mum will talk about the idea that some of her friends or some people who have been divorced, they end up in the same problem again next time because these problems aren't necessarily due to that relationship, but are actually inherent in the person maybe. And that's fair enough. And, all power to them. They've been happily married for, a long time. And it doesn't look like much is going to change. But, for instance, somebody else I know, their parents broke up when they were young. And their mum is very, independent. And she's sort of just installed this idea of independence on this person, and therefore they feel that like it was important for them to have an understanding that relationships can end, but yet people can still go on and continue to have fulfilling lives. So I'm sort of like now I'm like questioning, is getting married the be all and end all, or is that just what my parents have tried to install in me because it's worked really well for them? And then they see it as a, as a positive when other people might not see it as a positive.
yeah, I mean, for me and you, they're two like polar opposite experiences. You're a mum and a dad that stayed together your whole life. They've been happy. Whereas mine is the complete opposite in that like my sister's dad wasn't around, my younger brother's dad wasn't around, my dad wasn't around. There's never been a solid relationship base for me to look up to or to experience. It's always been very negative.
Yeah, that's crazy. For me to even
comprehend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't comprehend it.
So, but even though we've had those very different experiences, it doesn't seem like our thoughts or beliefs about relationships are that different.
No.
So maybe it doesn't influence you that much. I'm sure it does for some people.
It definitely does, and I think that parents should be aware of their bias and how they push that on to their children, because if your child doesn't want to get married, then you shouldn't force them to. And no parents, I'll take that back. Loads of parents will force their kids to, but loads of parents won't force their kids to, but will have told them their whole life that the most important thing in life is getting married, or at least like this is a hugely important thing. And then when you get to that point and you can't you haven't found a stable marriage, then you're going to feel like a failure. And there's nothing that you're going to be able to do as a parent to come back from that, because you've done a whole lifetime of installing the idea that marriage is the end goal for a relationship and in its own way for your life.
I guess it's kind of just it's each generation is just influenced by the previous generation, and this just goes on and on and on. And then, but like you said before, because your parents have had a positive experience with marriage, they're going to want that for their kids, because to them that's great. They've had this good time. Whereas, I don't know. I don't think my mum has ever, if, for example, I don't think I've ever had a bad relationship because the one I'm in now is the only serious one I've ever had. But when my brother, for example, have had a bad relationship, she would be there to give advice at that point, rather than be there at the start and be like, don't do this or do this.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a different approach as well.
Other than till relatively recently, everybody in my family has always been in a relationship. Like, both my sisters and myself have had long periods of being in a relationship, and maybe that's because of this, like, because of the household that we were brought up in has made us, like, cherish this a lot, you know. Maybe too much.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I'm not trying to say either way, but there definitely could be a negative side when it comes to, like, attachment issues. I've been exploring that within myself, which is like, you know, how much do you want the other person around, or how much is it like something that you feel very comfortable in, like an attachment issue sort of thing. Like, do you feel uncomfortable when you're on your own and you need someone to be there? I don't really know. It's impossible to tell because there's nothing to compare it to. If that is, you know, I've always been in many relationships, and if that is the case, then I've got no life to compare it to. It's like asking a woman what it's like to be, like, when they ask people on the radio terrible things, like what it's like to be a woman composer. We're like, well, I don't know what it's like to be a man composer.
Yeah.
There's nothing to compare it to. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I don't really have. I mean, between maybe the ages of like 14 and 18, I had like those weird little 3, 4, 5 month relationships that you have in high school every now and then. I had a couple of them, but other than that, I never really had any sort of relationship that I took seriously up until 3.5 years ago now. But so I don't really have much to compare it to either, because I think your age really matters. I think when you get to sort of your mid-20s, that's when you are most likely to sort of really understand what relationships are and how they affect you, and how you might feel in and out of one. But like you say, if you don't have any experience of like spending a good few years just being single as a mature adult, not as like a 14-year-old, because I don't think that really counts in terms of like understanding what it means.
Yeah.
So if you got to think to compare it to like that, then it would be hard. But I think now that I've been in a very long relationship, the idea of being single and of not having that person there is quite daunting, I think. So like I think it just depends on your experiences in it, because my brother's like the same as you. He's always been in relationships since he was like 15, 16. I can't think of a time where he was single for more than like 6 months or something. And every single one of those relationships has like got him pretty like full on.
Right.
No matter how long it was for. If it was like, I don't know, a couple of years, it was like a really full on couple of years, like full on like deep relationships. And that's just what he likes to do. That's just what he does, and it's fine because that works for him. Whereas for me, I was like the complete opposite up until a few years ago. So I don't know if, I guess in me and him, we're opposites in that way, even though we've had the same influences. So I guess it depends how you take it.
Do you have any methods for keeping the relationship good? Because we like live together now with your other half, your partner. And yeah, like when it gets frustrating or whatever, do you have any inner mantras or
I'm honest, I
pieces
don't.
of advice you look up to?
I don't really, and I think that mainly comes down to, without like bragging in any way, but we just don't really have many issues. We just don't. We argue very, very little, and when we do, it's usually about things that are quite like, they're easy to overcome. We just don't really have that many problems to face as like within the relationship. So I don't have a repeated method or a thing that I usually do to deal with a certain situation, because they just don't really arise that much. My downfall is that I sometimes have too much pride. I sometimes don't know when to apologize or like when to give in an argument. So that's something I need to work on.
And what about the other half of the relationship? How are they apologizing?
Probably too good.
Oh, too good.
Well,
right.
I don't know if it's too good, but she'll just apologise, whereas I won't.
Okay.
And if I've already said it once, I won't say it again. I'll just be like, I've already said sorry. Let's just move on. Whereas I should just be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, sorry.
I think that's quite a common thing, and that I know we talked about this the other day, but it's never going to go on air. But the idea of want and willing that I spoke about before, that's a good one for when you need to apologise. Which is the like, what do I want? And what am I willing to do? And in your case, what do I want? Well, you want to just sort of cuddle up on the sofa and watch TV, but you can't because, you've put bad tension in the air by not apologising. And then you think, what am I willing to do? And you're like, am I willing to just apologise sincerely? And obviously the answer to that question is always going to be yes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For something so small as that. So if you try asking yourself that, what do I want? What am I willing to do? You're always going to be willing to put your pride aside. But unless you question it, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, I in those moments, I lose myself in the frustration. I don't even think about the fact that I definitely don't think about like that. But in that scenario, it just doesn't happen. So that's the difficult part of it, isn't it? It's like the anger, or just the argument itself. The tension that creates just completely clouds your mind.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's why having like a little mantra like that I learned from listening to a podcast with Dan Harmon, and he was talking about it, about something about his therapist saying to him, just the idea of want and willing, and it is quite interesting. It goes into like a lot of different things, but I also, without trying to pry, because I don't want to like start picking apart your relationship in ways you maybe haven't thought about it before. Not always the key to a good relationship isn't always avoiding bad things, but it's trying to incorporate good things. And I don't know how those can be, those challenges can be met as well. Do you think about that at all?
Give me examples. Like, what do you mean by that?
The key to a good relationship isn't always trying to like overcome challenges, but it's trying to keep the whole thing feeling enjoyable all the way through, like fresh or whatever it is you need to have like similar hobbies, or to be interested in the other person's hobby or something like that. I don't know. You guys are quite interested in each other's hobbies, I guess.
Yeah,
as opposed to having the same interests. You just are interested in what the other person's doing.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really have any of the same interests. But I mean, some
Which
of them
is bizarre
are some of them are like within the same sphere. Like we're both creatives. Like she does animation. I not at the moment, but I was a musician / will be again at some point soon. And like my role is quite creative in itself anyway. We're doing like this podcast stuff, which is quite like, I guess that's quite creative as well. And everything she does is very creative. So, but while they're not exactly the same interests, they're still within the same ball of ideas, which I guess makes it easy to be interested in each other's things. Because especially with, I guess, I don't know, I'm trying to think about how it relates to each other, like music and film. They're similar in some ways in terms of like how you can be interested in it.
Yeah, they're both creative subjects. There's both a sort of like building blocks. You build things up, and you have an initial idea, and then you create things based around that idea. So it's easy. Yeah. I've been with mostly musicians. The last 3 girlfriends I've had that have been big parts of my life are musicians to some degree or another.
Do you think you gravitate towards that? Well, you must do. But what?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. But I mean, I'm the first person I met in music class in college, and second person at university, and like also on the scene, just the music scene. And I don't know. I think that if I wasn't aware of that fact, I'd probably be the sort of person to preach the idea that you don't want to like shit where you eat or something. Like, you don't want too much music in your life. You don't want to mix these two. Don't want to mix business and pleasure.
I think maybe that's what works for us, is that
you don't.
Yeah, like we both, while we live together, we spend so much time together, but we don't do everything together, and we don't like think about the same things all the time. Like we can very easily go our separate ways in many different ways, in terms of like spending a day both in the house but both doing completely different things. So like, and then we can come together and talk about those completely different things, which allows for like conversation that doesn't just like always revolve around the same thing.
That's very important, especially right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I can be sat downstairs and she can be sat upstairs, and 2 hours later we can have like loads and loads of things to talk about just from the previous 2 hours, just because we've been doing different things.
I guess one thing that I look for, like, in every one of my friends is the ability to talk about music, like, and then, you know, with a girlfriend, it's the ability to talk about music on a very deep level. It doesn't have to happen all the time, but, you know, I just want to be. Sometimes I just find myself like just talking very passionately about music I like, and if I was with someone who didn't like that, they'd just be like, okay. And then I'd feel very empty, probably. You know, if my loved one looked at me when I was talking about something that I don't talk that passionately about that many things in everyday life. You know, I talk passionately about music, and then the other person just sort of pars you off.
Like, it's for you though. It's not an issue, is it? Like when you're dedicating your whole life to something, and like you are with music, then it makes total sense that you would want someone who can feel the same things and is interested in that same dedication that you're putting into your life.
Yeah, and also with the last relationship, we did a whole opera together.
Exactly, yeah.
And so many people said, that's a bad idea.
Right.
They were like, people love to give relationship advice to other people, don't they? Especially people whose relationships aren't going very well. But they love to say, like, you know, that's a terrible idea. You're gonna, you know, it's gonna be the end of the relationship. It's gonna be really difficult. It's not gonna be fun. Blah blah blah. And to be fair, there was a lot of challenges that came with that, being in a relationship, because like, people can be quite familiar, and if you're paying the person as well to be in this project, which I was, then it's difficult to draw the line. So she would be like, well, I have some things I want to say to you about it, which is fine, which is great. Or like, and then I would be like, well, you know, would you say that to the person who is paying you on another opera? And the answer would probably be no. So sometimes it's like, you got to cross the line. You don't want to be like, you know, disrespected, not by your girlfriend. That's fine. You can have a higher level of disrespect by your girlfriend. You don't want to be disrespected by the cast. Do you know what I mean? That's what you don't want to be disrespected by. So that became an issue occasionally, but you just have to be very sensitive to that. The bigger issue, that one, you know, when it comes up, at least you can talk about it. You can just be like, please, I'll help you out. Just don't be disrespectful, or don't be like, you know, let's just keep it cool, which is fine. It only ever really heated up a few times. But the most difficult part of that is that it's a very challenging thing to put on an opera, put on any stage show, and you're both very stressed. And who do you complain to? Do you know what I mean? You can't complain to each other because you're both in the same position. So you do complain to each other, but you end up just living the opera or whatever show or whatever art project you're doing 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're doing it in the rehearsal room, and it maybe is a really stressful day in the rehearsal room, and then you come home, and then you're still there, like you're still with the person doing it. And to be fair, it hardly ever became a problem. Tears were shed, you know, things were said, but at the end of the day, it always was resolved. But there is issues there, but people never really know what the issues are. They're just like, oh, you're going to break up.
I think, to me, like doing something like that is a challenge like worth facing to find out if your relationship is like can handle it. Like what's so bad about putting your relationship through these tests to see whether you can deal with these situations, especially like you when you gravitate towards people who are in your field. Chances are you're going to work with them at some point, especially like you if you're a composer and you're dating a musician. There's pretty much no way that you're not going to work together on something.
Yeah,
so,
that's
like,
true.
Like it seems like say people make assumptions based on maybe their experiences or based on just what they think, but not actually like consider. They probably haven't even been through it themselves.
No,
Probably
not
just
at
like,
all.
oh yeah, well that sounds like a terrible idea because I've got this idea that if you work with your partner, then you spend too much time together and it's too much stress. But if you're in a really good relationship, there's no reason why you can't face that challenge and be successful with it, just like you were.
Well, yeah, and actually, like the benefits way outweigh the like cons, because the benefits was that you're working with somebody who, you know, understands the things that you like, and not just understands the things you like, but a lot of the things that you like, you've come together at the same point. So like, oh, I really like this piece of music. I've just found out about it. Show it to the other person. You both really like it. You end up listening to it together loads. And then that influences your listening. And also you end up liking things that other people like more. You know, you might like a song, but if we both like the song, it's going to increase that tenfold.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're working with somebody who can just really like move in your circle really easily. So it can be great. And I think that most of the time, especially for the actual performance, was great.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it does come down to assumption and this like built up idea of, you know, spending too much time with your partner or like just putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be together all the time within like a stressful thing. But like if you think about what relationships are, throughout, if you're with someone for your whole life, throughout that time you're going to be in situations where you're both going to be stressed and you're both deeply involved, like having kids or like buying a house or someone loses their job. It's the same sort of thing on a different scale. But if you can't put on an opera together, how are you going to have a kid? Maybe like there are definite like influences from being able to create a project to having a baby or buying a house.
I think having a baby is probably quite similar to the doing a big project together, because you both have different ideas of where you want it to go. Only one person can be right all the time in each scenario, you know, and it's a progressing thing. And also, I mean, so often during that opera, it felt like it was never going to end. Do you know what I mean? It felt like it was never going to end, but you also felt like I'm so invested right now that I can't give up. Which I'm sure you feel, many people must feel a similar way with a child, which is like, you know, this is never going to end, but I can't opt out now because of many reasons.
Exactly.
You know, moral reasons, financial reasons, all sorts of things.
No matter how stressful it gets, like, I mean, plenty of people run away from their families, obviously, but that's not what you should do. As stressful as it gets, you should be able to stay in that situation and handle it somewhat effectively in order to for the outcome to be successful in some way.
Yeah, you hope. Well, to give that child as much support as possible. My last question is, how important do you think cooking together is in a relationship? I think two things are a really good indicator for me of a good relationship. If you get drunk, do you have a good time or do you argue? That's a big one.
Yeah, I like that one.
Because often people can be so good together, but when they get drunk, they just don't. They're not the best.
Yeah, they don't click.
They don't click.
It's different for me because obviously I don't drink, but several times I've had to deal with my partner being very, very drunk, and I've managed to keep my cool. But I guess it's not the same.
That's
situation.
different. Yeah, that's definitely different.
Yeah,
it's when you're both drunk, and obviously you don't drink, so whatever. But the second one is like, can you cook together in the same kitchen effectively? A small, regular size kitchen, just big enough for two people, but not perfect. Even our kitchen's quite big, so just a regular kitchen. Can you cook together? No problem. Or do you get in each other's way?
Yeah, I like that one. I mean,
give us the answer.
For us, I'm trying to think of a time where it's been an issue. I don't think it has.
Do you cook together?
Yeah, we haven't. I think we used to do it a lot more than we do now.
Alternate.
Yeah, we tend to alternate now, but sometimes we will kind of help each other out. But there have been we bake together quite a lot.
Yeah, that's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, the same thing. So
stick on the music and have a dance.
Yeah, we dance.
Yeah, well, I know people who literally just like, get almost like see red when they're cooking with somebody else. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, like because the other person's getting in the way.
Yeah, we don't experience that, and I do think that's a good indicator of being able to deal with each other in a minutely stressful situation.
Yeah, I'm not like the best cook, but I'm a very clean cook. So if they're like, oh, I need you to chop up the onions, whatever. I mean, I can cook. I'm not just demoted to onion chopper. But if they would need me to chop up the onions, chop up the vegetables, I'll do that. But then I'll just like clean up all that stuff and then clean up around the person. So the other person is like, having the kitchen cleaned around them. I guess I'm just like eager for attention or eager for some acknowledgement.
Yeah. Well, what was I going to say?
That's probably due to the growing up in a relationshipy family.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
desperate for admiration. Look at me, I can clean up.
What I was gonna say is that I guess it really depends on what sort of person each person is. Like if both people are really like generally quite helpful people, then cooking in the kitchen together is going to be pretty easy because you're just going to be like, if someone asks you to do something and you have quite a helpful personality, then you'll do it without like getting frustrated. Whereas to be fair, I've been in bad moods before and we've been cooking together and she'll ask me to do something and I'll get annoyed because I'm like, but I'm already doing this, and it's literally just like to turn the tap on or something. So I guess it really does depend on your mood as well. But I feel like if you're generally quite a helpful person, then it shouldn't be an issue.
I find cooking brings me out of my bad mood as well. If I am.
Yeah.
Then start putting on some music and having a little boogie.
There's a real reward to cooking as well, to cooking well.
Oh yeah.
Especially on baking. A lot of rewarding baking.